Okay, welcome to Chapter 7 of Leadership as a Philosophy, Not a Checklist, the solution. Now, this is my proposed ideas for how to fix the problem that we started off all the way at the beginning. And the way that we fixed the problem at the beginning, which is how do we fix the leadership sine wave, bathtub, whatever, is we need to identify leaders better and we need to utilize them better. And so this series, or this next two pieces, it's going to be this next chapter, whatever you want to call it, is going to be broken into two sections. First is how to identify them. Second is how to use them. 100% honesty, this is where I got stuck because a bunch of the stuff that I'm going to talk about are things that I have read or seen work in rare instances or be used in rare instances. But there's no research on any of this. This is all just my idea, looking at a bunch of separate facts and pieces of evidence to try to bring together what I think is the solution. So please don't walk out of here saying that it's definitively wrong. I want to have a conversation about this. Part of the reason I'm doing all this is to get things going and is to change the way that we think about leadership because we're doing it wrong. We're doing it wrong. The first part is going to be how to identify leaders. I won't do an intro video for the second half. We'll just have part two. But part of the reason for the solution is that none of those things are somebody taking a written test. Because I don't believe that you can identify a leader from a written test. There's hints and clues and other sorts of things, but you can't just say, hey, go take a test and now you're a leader. As we talked about in the philosophy, humility is supposed to be a big deal for a leader. Well, imagine that you take somebody and you put them through college and they fight and scrape and are all about me so they can go to the best business school. They're trying to stand out and be the most outstanding and amazing person so they can go to the best school, because when you go to the best school, you get the best job and you get the most money. And you're told, oh, you're a future leader of America. And then you go to the business school, and for 2 years, you're told you're a future leader of America. And so all you've heard is how amazing you are and how wonderful you're going to be and how this place is somehow bestows upon you these miraculous abilities. And then with all of that hubris, you go out and have to be a leader. Where have you had to demonstrate in your past that you had the ability to be humble? That's probably the last thing from your mind. You're probably the person that thinks, I have the answer because I'm amazing. It's just something to think about. So anyway, short intro, and we'll go right into the first part of the solution and talk about some thoughts on that. And then, like I said, we'll follow with how to change your organization in order to capitalize on leadership. Now, as I've said, these are my ideas based off of what I've seen and assembling a bunch of different stuff. I could be way off base, but it's not being done anywhere, so maybe it's worth thinking about, or maybe it's worth looking at. And I'd really like to start a conversation around this because something's not working. We have a whole bunch of people that hate going to work. We have a whole bunch of people that hate their bosses. We have a whole bunch of people that hate the organization that they work in because it's inflexible and there's lying and there's backstabbing. So whatever we're doing now isn't working. It's not. If it is, then everything would be goodness and light, or at least much better, or at least not misery. Because nobody's expects every job to be, sunshine and rainbows. But at least it shouldn't be misery. And that's kind of the main objective of all of this, is to change a lot of things for a lot of people. So enough rambling. Thank you for your time. And we will proceed next to the slide portion. Thanks. Alrighty, so welcome to the PowerPoint portion of Chapter 7. What I want to do is walk through two things that are documents that you can go research and read, and I highly encourage that you do. Don't take my word for them, because I could be completely incorrect. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the reliability, validity, and factor structure of the Creative Achievement Questionnaire. That's by Doctors Shelley Carson from Harvard, Jordan B. Peterson from the University of Toronto, and Daniel Higgins, Harvard University. I tried to email all three of these professors to ask them some questions. However, as you can probably tell from Jordan Peterson, can't get a hold of him. Second is Daniel Higgins. He's retired, I think. And then I also emailed Shelley Carson, or Dr. Carson, and I didn't get an answer back either. So this is my idea without a bunch of the background. Second thing is the Big Five personality test. Big Five personality test is sort of radically different than the Myers-Briggs and some other popular personality tests because it pretty much tells you what you're bad at as well as good at, so that you can perhaps go find a job that you know you're going to be good at rather than trying to fight your way into something that's weird. And then the third thing is my own idea. So let's just get started into this. A little bit of history. So 3 ideas to identify the talent. So the creative survey thing, kind of interesting. What these doctors were trying to do was determine whether or not you could identify if somebody had the ability to do creative work. And so they determined creative work to be music, painting, writing, dance, inventions, science, that sort of stuff. And so the way they wanted to figure out how to do that was give you a survey to see if you had done creative stuff, and then have experts in those fields come and validate whether or not what that person had created was actually the correct idea or the right thing. So part of the experiment was for them to have a bunch of people that said they were artistically creative, basically, and then gave them a bunch of raw material, the same materials, to go make a collage. And then when they were finished making their collage, these 4 art experts or actual artists came over and reviewed their work and said, hey, this is actually pretty artistic. This is actually interesting, or this isn't. Anybody could have done that sort of thing. So that same approach, that same idea is the exact same thing that happens with leadership. Nobody that's an actual leader will look at somebody and go down this checklist and say, oh, yep, they got their numbers correct, they've done this correct. But they will look at it and go, oh, wow, that's leadership ability right there. That person right there was a leader. So my idea was, I'll read a couple of the questions from the actual survey for the art. My idea was that you could ask the same sort of questions to find out if somebody has leadership ability. The problem that I think they had, and what's interesting is one of the areas that they tried to do research in was entrepreneurship. But then at the end, when they did the actual surveys, they didn't come up with a survey for entrepreneurship. And the reason that I think that is it's very difficult to go find an entrepreneur, and the same to go find a leader, because you find somebody that's been through a bunch of management training and is now in charge, to consider that person a leader, as we've discussed throughout the whole thing, is incorrect. And so they didn't have the right people to write the right questions to make sure that they're to at least get going in the right, correct sort of direction to identify the talent. So some of the questions that were asked, I'll just do the one for visual arts. So some of the questions, and this is determined if somebody had creative ability, is, I'm sorry for looking down at my notes, I don't just see the gray, strategically dyed gray hair. So I have no training or recognized talent in this area. Skip to the next subject. I have taken lessons in this area. Okay. People have commented on my talent in this area. All right. I have won a prize or prizes that were juried at an art show. I have had a showing of my work in a gallery. I have sold a piece of my work. My work has been critiqued in local publications, and my work has been critiqued in national publications. So the idea behind that is, if you have those sort of things and have done that level of creativity, then perhaps you have the creative capacity. Well, just like we talked about in the archetype, or was it the hierarchy, or was it the competency? It was the competency, where we said you have an artist that sits there and looks at 8 different colors of paint, and somebody who's not, and that artist is going to do some amazing thing with that palette, and the person who's not is going to do something super basic. Well, it's the same idea with leadership. You have a team of people. You've got somebody with no leadership talent in charge of them. The team is failing and struggling. You go and get somebody that's a leader, a leadership type, put them in charge with the same palette. They create this amazing result. But it's hard to quantify, because how do you sit there and say, well, that's excellent? This is the difficulty. This is why I ended up getting stuck right in the book. So real quick, we'll go through what I consider would be some ideas for questions to ask in a survey like this. So I have no training or recognized talent in this area. Perfect. This flies in the face of everybody saying you can make anybody a leader. Somebody who has no recognized talent or training probably doesn't do that. This one's different. I volunteer for projects so they will succeed and not for promotion. This gets complicated into the whole definition of a leader, attenuating competence in environmental hierarchies in pursuit of a goal. Suddenly there's a goal, and that leader thinks that they can tune everything up to accomplish that goal. That's the challenge. That's what the leader will want to do. I've led small teams with an above average success rate. Not that the leader was amazing, but that the teams were amazing. People come to me for leadership advice, not management advice, although that happens too. You can have somebody who's really good at management answer a management question, no problem. But somebody that's got a leadership issue, how do I deal with this person and this conflict and this problem, and why is this a mess? Somebody goes to that person to ask them questions, that's your leader. My leadership has been recognized by company. This one's difficult because a lot of quote unquote leadership awards nowadays are really rewarding great management. And to me, if you want to see how a leader is doing, you check the people. I have replaced unsuccessful managers and led the team to achieve success. That's what I talked about with the music thing. I have received an award or prize for my leadership. Same problem before, though, is that a lot of the leadership awards have been corrupted to the point where now it's all political, and somebody just gets it because they're somebody's friend, and ooh, we're going to recognize this person as a great leader. I've created leadership sayings that are now regularly repeated by others. This one's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but what ends up happening is you'll find a leader that may not have any training in leadership, and after some time in charge has some phrases, some philosophy things that they will say. And they sound strangely like the stuff from 2,000 years ago. And then the employees that are working with them, or the people working with them, will start quoting them. Well, it's not that they're quoting the leader because they're so amazing. They're quoting it because the wisdom is correct. So this one's kind of deep and maybe too complicated, because somebody might think, I didn't ever say anything original. And so this could be a throwaway, but I don't know. There's me spitballing. I regularly find novel solutions using unrealized talents of my team members. Back to what we talked about with the creative thing. I often think about ways that leadership problems can be solved, not management, but how do we get people to do the best? And we've tried 6 things. Well, what's another way we can do it, instead of let's just try the same system harder, because that doesn't work, right? My work has been cited by other leaders. That's a great example. Somebody comes back to you, hey, I heard you say that you did this thing, and I said, that's a good idea, I'm going to go try it. That means that you're saying something that's effective and successful. So that's a good indicator as well. And then I have performed leadership actions regardless of my position. And that means taking responsibility for something that's probably not your responsibility, making sure that the team has some team cohesion, even though you might not be in the leadership position of the team, but you're still taking care of things. And we'll talk about that more later. And I often experiment with different leadership approaches. I'm sure I've said this many times throughout the videos, but there is not one leadership style. You have a bunch of different people, and the environment's changing, the situations are changing. You might have to use 6 different leadership approaches with 6 different people in 10 minutes. You might have one person that needs to be handled with kid gloves. You need one person that needs to be challenged. Or the person that normally needs to be challenged needs to be handled with kid gloves that day. And using the philosophy, vigilance, empathy, integrity, and humility, you figure that out and you have to change yourself. The idea that the leader is some imperial thing and this is my style and that's all I'm doing, it's not correct, because the true leaders were not that way. Well, this is my way or the highway. Yeah, immediately get rid of that person. So then observation. So here you are on the team. Here you have a team that's doing some things. And then these are characteristics of leaders working within a team. Not the best producer on the team, but coaches and improves others to be better. They may be the best producer, but very rarely is that the case. Normally, they're trying to get everybody around them better. They're pretty good. They have probably learned from the person that's the expert, but then they're trying to get everybody else to do good things, even though they might not be in charge. Takes responsibility, even though not in charge. That's similar to the question. Somebody who's, the boss comes down, this is a disaster, it needs to get fixed. Somebody steps up and goes, I'm not in charge, I know that, but I'm going to make sure that it gets done. And then they'll go around and make sure that it gets done. And then usually not take credit. Say, hey, I heard what you said, I got so-and-so to do it. A person that you go to get the real deal. Not the gossip, but the person, if you go down and say, hey, we just had this thing that happened. The team leader got a $5,000 reward because this project was done immaculately, but everybody's in a bad mood. The team just had a great result. Why is everybody in a bad mood? And you go to you don't know who this person is, and you say, what happened? They say, well, Lisa came up with the main concept. Gene did all of the metrics for it, and then George helped format the stuff. The team leader wasn't even in the room. The team leader was never around when any of this was going on. But because we got this stuff going on, this is the result that you got. And that team leader didn't even come in and thank everybody for their work. So everybody's cranky because here's this great big thing and they didn't get any recognition. The person that you go to that tells you that information, that's a leader. Or has leadership talent. A person who volunteers for projects, not for glory, but to make sure that they succeed. We talked about that over there as a question. Hey, this is complicated. It's hard. There might not be any reward in it. Well, I'll take care of it. It needs to get done. We got to do it. Leadership. And then I love this one. The person who annoys the bosses with questions that are difficult to answer. Because we have to is never a good example for a leader. Because we've always done it that way is not a good answer for a leader. That usually will take a leader and put him in a tailspin. This is broken. Well, it's the way we've always done it. That's me. I do the same thing. All right, so Big Five personality. Now this one, I highly encourage that you go do some research on it on your own. But the Big Five personality traits are agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and openness to experience. So those are then broken down into a couple of subsets. But the things that I think, and it's sort of known, and people talk about it all the time, but nobody's sat down and looked at it. So Big Five personality test. There isn't a leadership thing, but I think these are components of the personality of a leader. So the first one is openness to experience, which is openness and intellect. So openness is, hey, here's the plan. Here's what's going on. And then all of a sudden, some new fact comes in. You say, oh, that fact, I needed that fact to answer this problem, so perfect. Even if somebody completely, whoever comes up with the fact, the leader doesn't care. The leader grabs it, throws it into the plan. Intellect is different than different than IQ. So IQ, standard, whatever. Intellect is the ability to take information and assimilate it or find out what's interesting about it right away. So if you think about that, we talked about several times throughout the videos that the leader is the person that's keeping an eye on all of the hierarchies in the organization and the environment and looking for chaos. Well, who do you want to do that? You want somebody who's open to new ideas and is smart enough to figure out stuff all the time. And so that's a big deal. Next is assertiveness. Now, you don't need to be 100% assertive as a leader. There are times, and this is why the word vigilance is so interesting to me, because it sort of gives you the idea of a guard. So, hey, we're making a decision, we're doing this sort of stuff, here's the decision. Plenty of input beforehand, great. Plenty of suggestions, great. But then when it's time to make a decision, we're good. However, there are certain times that a leader will put their foot down and say, nope, we're not doing that. Or here's what we're doing, and it's not time to negotiate. You have to have some of that, but you can't be a complete tyrant where it's my way or the highway, or so passive that you say, oh, whatever you want, because the leader has to make decisions. The leader has to be in charge. The leader is, at the end of the day, the one that's responsible, and so there are times when you need that. And then the last one was agreeableness, because just like you said, many times, or like we've talked about, many times the leader is perfectly fine with something if it's within the parameters that they want to make the goal. If it's not going to cause hierarchies to go out of whack, if it's not going to cause the environment to go into chaos, if it's going to get the job done in an efficient way, sure. But if not, then you got to go to the assertiveness part. If it's a problem, say, well, maybe we should tweak that a little bit. And so one thing that you notice is not in here, and I talked about it, was extroversion. Well, extroversion, I don't know, and I talk a lot. I have several people that I recognize as leaders that are friends of mine, and I would say that I am the most extroverted out of all of them. Several of them most of them are mildly introverted, but they still take care of people. They still do all that sort of thing. So the big personality, the walking around chatting everybody up, the overwhelming person that just fills the room up, that's not necessarily a leader. I think that super extroverted leaders are more rare than the ones that are moderately introverted, because you want that person to be able to take some time and think and let people do their job. And then the other thing that was interesting is, and I didn't put in here, I think that neuroticism, which is worry about things going wrong, is extraordinarily low in a leader, because a leader is positive. Leaders, hey, we can go get stuff done. We can make this happen. I'm sure that this can happen. So it should be low in neuroticism. If you have somebody that's high in neuroticism, they're not going to be a good leader, because you need somebody who's positive and thinks you can go get the goal. Anyway, two of these, like I said, you got to go read them. And then the observation part. So these are the ways that I submit, all three of them put together, that you observe and see if somebody's got the leadership ability, because then you've got at least three different things that give you an indication that this person has that talent. And it might be blatantly obvious. Anyway, appreciate your time. And the next section will be what to do once you find a leader type. All right, have a great day.